Hi everyone, my name is Jodi Lynch and I am an education major in the Oneonta MVCC Bridges program. In this video, my partner Allison and I are going to be discussing Heraclitus and his life and his works. I will begin speaking first and Allison will speak after me. We both feel that this project is great practice for us, considering we will have to give lectures to children in our near future. Although there is little known about Heraclitus and his life, we have compiled some information to share with all of you today. According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Heraclitus lived in Ephesus, which is located near what is known today as modern Turkey. Again, according to the Stanford Encyclopedia, Heraclitus inherited the title in the office of king of the Ionians. He later gave this title to his brother. He is generally considered to have favored aristocratic government against democracy based on his own political observations. Based on what we have learned from our 4.2 class lecture video, we know that Heraclitus is self-assured and arrogant. We also know that Heraclitus thought of himself as a god. According to Britannica, Heraclitus was unpopular in his time and was frequently scorned by later biographers. According to our 4.2 lecture video, Heraclitus believed that no one would understand him. He believed that his ideas were too profound for others to understand. From this same lecture video, we also know that Heraclitus was influenced by Xenophanes. According to the Encyclopedia of World Biography, Heraclitus' unique ideas set him apart. He is best known for his doctrines that things are constantly changing. This is known as the universal flux, which this information was taken from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Throughout our research, we have learned that most of Heraclitus' own written works have been lost, so the majority of what we do know about him comes from other people. His views survive in short fragments that are quoted and attributed to him by later authors. According to Britannica, one of his most famous fragments is an analogy of life to a river. This analogy says, "Upon those who step into the same rivers, different and ever different waters flow down." For example, Plato says, when talking about the universal flux, that he believes Heraclitus had said, "All things pass and nothing stays," and comparing existing things to flow of a river, he says, "You could not step twice into the same river." This being taken from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Heraclitus is also known for his belief that opposites coincide. This is known as the unity of opposites. According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Heraclitus' flux doctrine is a special case of the unity of opposites. The unity of opposites points to ways things are both the same and not the same over time. Therefore, he depicts two key opposites that are interconnected but not identical. Heraclitus sometimes explains how things have opposite qualities. Again, this is all taken from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. For example, a direct quote from one of Heraclitus' fragments says, open quote, "Sea is the purest and most polluted water, for fish drinkable and healthy, for men undrinkable and harmful." End quote. This is also taken from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. If we examine this direct quote from one of Heraclitus' fragments provided by Heraclitus in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, we can see that the sea has opposite qualities for fish than for men. For fish, the water is drinkable. However, for men, the water is harmful. According to Catherine Osborne, in our book Pre-Socratic Philosophy, a very short introduction on page 85, when looking at this fragment, she says, Heraclitus believed that the polluted seawater and the purest water were one and the same, as well as the drinkable and the undrinkable being one and the same. Another example of this can be read in our Pre-Socratic Philosophy book, a very short introduction by Catherine Osborne on page 85. According to Catherine Osborne, Heraclitus believed that, open quote, "up and down were one and the same," end quote. On page 84 of Catherine Osborne's Pre-Socratic Philosophy book, A Very Short Introduction, a direct quote from Heraclitus' fragment reads, open quote, "The road up and down is one and the same," end quote. According to Catherine Osborne, on page 84 of her book, Pre-Socratic Philosophy, A Very Short Introduction, Heraclitus speaks of many contrasting things, such as day and night or up and down being one or one and the same, end quote. Catherine Osborne continues to say that his point does not seem exactly to be that the opposite qualities themselves are no different or have no significance, but rather that they can both be used to describe the same thing at the same time. Again, this information can be found in our course book titled Pre-Socratic Philosophy, A Very Short Introduction by Catherine Osborne on page 85.
Hi everyone, as Jodi mentioned at the beginning of this lecture, my name is Allison and I'm going to be continuing to speak about Heraclitus for the remainder of this lecture. After completing our research on Heraclitus, we discovered after reviewing the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy that it is also important to mention Heraclitus when discussing cosmology and fire. As noted in one of our previous lecture videos from this course, titled 3.1, The First Pre-Socratics, the Milesians, we know that other early philosophers such as Thales, Anaximander, and Exemenes advocated for an ultimate principle of the universe. From our lecture video titled 3.1, The First Pre-Socratics, the Milesians, we know that Thales believed water was the ultimate principle of the universe. Anaximander believed it was the boundless, and Exemenes believed air was the first principle of the universe. Well, Heraclitus had his own belief as well. As referenced in our Pre-Socratic Philosophy, a very short introduction book by Catherine Osborne on page 89, Heraclitus, open quote, used the element known as fire to serve as the first principle of the physical universe, end quote. According to Britannica, Heraclitus, open quote, views fire as the essential material uniting all things, end quote. As noted in Britannica, Heraclitus perceived the world as, open quote, an ever-living fire, kindling in measures and being extinguished in measures, end quote. Again, this is taken from the Britannica website. According to the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Heraclitus is claiming that the world, open quote, comes to be and perishes in a fiery manner only to be born again, end quote. In Pre-Socratic Philosophy, a very short introduction, Catherine Osborne continues on page 89 to say, open quote, Heraclitus was pointing out that matter is not the basis of identity or continuity, end quote. Osborne also helps us understand this further when she writes, open quote, Heraclitus sometimes mentions fire as one stage in a sequence of changes that occur in the world, a stage that recurs periodically over time, either when the world is consumed by fire or when parts of it are kindled and cease to be what they formerly were, end quote. To have a better understanding of what Catherine Osborne meant by this, we turn to the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which states, Heraclitus believed that the earth transformed into water, of which half turns into fire and half into earth. So, in short, taken from the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, Heraclitus is trying to say that fire, water, and the earth are all connected. Catherine Osborne later mentions in her book, Pre-Socratic Philosophy, a very short introduction, that fire is, open quote, a consuming image rather than an image of continuity, end quote. Osborne states that, open quote, because of his interest in patterns of change rather than material identity, that it seems wrong to see Heraclitus's recurrent as an underlying element, end quote. Osborne continues to say, open quote, that it is better to treat it as a model for radical discontinuity of matter. To sum up, Heraclitus' perspective when it comes to fire, Catherine Osborne states on page 95 in our Pre-Socratic Philosophy book, A Very Short Introduction, that Heraclitus believed, open quote, fire consumes what was there before and gives back something quite different, end quote. Another important topic to discuss when discussing Heraclitus is logos. According to Catherine Osborne in our Pre-Socratic Philosophy, a very short introduction book on page 91, open quote, Heraclitus called the systematic structure which underlies every aspect of our experience logos, end quote. On page 92, Osborne states, open quote, for Heraclitus, the logos is something that we need to learn to notice if we are to understand the true significance of the world, end quote. As referenced in Britannica, Heraclitus also, open quote, stressed the need for people to live together in social harmony, end quote. Britannica continues, open quote, Heraclitus complained that most people failed to comprehend the logos, otherwise known as the reason, end quote. We are able to understand Heraclitus' frustration for people not understanding the logos when we read what is believed to be a fragment from his lost book. On page 92 of our Pre-Socratic Philosophy, a very short introduction book, Catherine Osborne includes fragment 1 from Heraclitus' lost book. In this fragment, Heraclitus states, open quote, with this theory, which is forever human, people are out of touch both before they have heard it and once first they have heard it. For although all things take place in accordance with this theory, they are like beginners experimenting with both words and practices such as these that I am going through as I divide each thing according to nature and say how it is. But it eludes other people what they are doing when they are awake, just as it eludes them what they do in their sleep, end quote. According to Catherine Osborne, the main point Heraclitus is trying to make in this fragment from the lost book is that people are failing to understand what he is trying to show them before and after he tells them. Based on the information that we found from Britannica, in short, it seems that Heraclitus is claiming that it is hard to live in social harmony when most people fail to comprehend the logos. When thinking back to what Jodi discussed with you all about the unity of opposites earlier in this lecture, according to Britannica, open quote, a significant manifestation of the logos, Heraclitus claimed, is the underlying connection between opposites, end quote. Think back to Heraclitus' fragment about seawater that Jodi discussed earlier when discussing the unity of opposites. According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, the fragment states, open quote, sea is the purest and most polluted water. For fish, drinkable and healthy. For men, undrinkable and harmful, end quote. According to Britannica, Heraclitus is saying that, open quote, a single substance may be perceived in a varied ways, being that seawater is both helpful and harmful. In conclusion, Jodi and I thought it would be a great idea to mention an accomplishment of Heraclitus as well as one of his influences. According to the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, one of Heraclitus' accomplishments is that he, open quote, makes human values a central concern of philosophy for the first time, end quote. Also, as referenced in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, it is believed that Heraclitus may have, open quote, provoked Parmenides to develop a contrasting philosophy. Though Jodi and I have cited throughout our narration of this lecture, we have also provided a slide with all of our references cited in APA format where you can find all the sources we used throughout our lecture. If you are interested in learning more about Heraclitus on your own, we highly recommend examining these sources. That concludes our lecture on Heraclitus. I hope you all enjoyed it and were able to learn something new.